Okay, cool. I don't want to only cover existential psychology or existential personality theory because existential theories in general are built on a huge number of like philosophical ideas or thinkers and figures that are usually just brushed over in most classes. When I remember we finished existential therapy in like what an hour, because what would you cover? I mean, there's a lot to cover, but they don't, and I always found that very annoying. So we'll do things a little differently. This whole class, this whole hour that we have with us today, right? I want to focus on building a very strong background on existential philosophy. And I want you to also look inward during this hour, because once we have that, in the next we can focus more on figures like Rollo May and stuff for existential psychology. But this hour is much more about you and to think about it. So before we begin, what do you know about existential philosophy? Any people, any ideas, any concepts? Put it down. Whatever you know, anything. Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Man is condemned to be free. Who said that? Shower thoughts. I'm glad you said that. That's one of the first things I have to clarify. Closely linked to humanistic, Rollo May, Hopeless Hope. Okay. Sartre, Suffering, Free Will, Freedom and Responsibility. Oh, is that August Comte? I didn't. Okay. Didn't realize the positivist dudes here with us. Freedom and Responsibility. आखिर जिंदा क्यों हैं? Yalom, Will, Free Will, Purpose of Life. I made a. Hey, me too. Why am I? Ubermensch. Okay. What else do you know about it? Anything else you remember? Know from existential philosophy, psychology? God is dead. Okay. Okay. It looks like you are what you choose. Absurdism, death, my favorite. Okay. All right. Holocaust. Okay. I wouldn't really call Holocaust exist. Okay. Fine. Okay. We give it because of Viktor Frankl. Cool. Dasein. The Good Place. Oh my God, that was such a good show. Take it. Awesome. Before we start, we'll do a bit of a blind spot test to check your understanding of existential psychology or existential philosophy. Okay. And some of these are taken from past year net questions, by the way. Okay. Just 5 questions, nothing too difficult. Okay. We'll do a quick blind spot test. Okay. Simple. Let's start with the first one. The term daimonic was coined by. My screen's visible, right? Yeah, it is. Because I'm not getting it. People, answers? You can just write 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever. Getting mixed answers. A, B, 1, 2, 2, 1. Daimonic. I like this rainbow. Okay. Okay, I'm getting very mixed answers, but this was, I think, asked in one. I think it was, but the answer is Rollo May. It's May. Yes, it is May. How did you know? It's almost June. I'm sorry. I'll show myself out. It was Rollo May, and we'll cover daimonic. Daimonic is a very cool thing. In fact, it is the crux of one theory known as the bicameral mind, which I'll cover later when we're talking about Rollo May. But it's basically saying that in the past, figures like Plato and stuff, right, where the words daimonic are used in their works, they tend to feel like the thoughts that are coming into their head, let's say this is their head, these thoughts that are coming in, they thought that they were coming from this daimonic, basically some spirit or some being. And they thought that whatever thoughts are coming from this deity. But this person who came up with this bicameral theory, he's saying that because their brains were not integrated properly at that point, they were still evolving, whatever thoughts we get right now, right? Whatever thoughts you get, you don't claim that it's coming from a deity. You say it's your own thought, but they could not do that. It's a very wild theory. It doesn't really get much of a proper space. We'll talk about it properly. It's a very cool conspiracy theory kind of a thing, but it actually has some good. I don't want to say evidence for it, but it's actually it makes sense kind of a thing. You can't believe it on a daily day-to-day basis, but it makes sense. But yeah, here it's the daimonic. Okay, next thing. The term will to meaning is associated with 1, 2, 3, 4. Simple. Easy peasy. Yeah. Frankel. Awesome. We'll cover this also. Will to meaning. And how he's opposing some very important figure. Do you know who is opposing over here? Ironically, he is borrowing from this person and opposing him at the same time. Anyone wants to guess? Frankel's theory is built on this one. Okay, close. Yes. Technically, you're right. Technically, you're right, but there's a key figure about Adler. Okay, we'll cover it. Don't worry. But the irony is that Frankel is borrowing from this guy and opposing him at the same time. No, it's not a psychologist. To strife. Okay. Next question. The term will to power is associated with 1, 3, 1, 4. See, haven't covered it properly. The answer is Adler. Alfred Adler, will to power. I personally believe, and some people also do believe, that Adler was the first existential therapist because his ideas are so similar that you don't feel like he belongs to the psychoanalytic school. It feels like he's an existentialist, and we'll talk about it when we get to striving teleology. It'll make sense. Okay. Next, paradoxical intention falls under which of the following? Narrative practice, logotherapy, existential therapy, reciprocal inhibition. This is fairly simple. Yeah, this you've studied. It comes under logotherapy. And who gave paradoxical intention first? Who does the idea of paradoxical intention come from? Anyone knows? Who originated the idea? Nope, not Frankel. Not Frankel. Frankel is stealing from someone, is borrowing from someone. Paradoxical intention does not come from him. It comes from some other guy. Nope, not Rolome. Not Nietzsche. Not Kierkegaard. Not Nietzsche. Not Kafka. Kafka? Well, Kafka. Adler, yes. It comes from Alfred Adler. That's what I'm saying, right? Adler is pretty much the first existential therapist because everyone is building on him, right? Has Sam covered Adler? Has he covered Adler? No? Okay. I'll try to cover him then with the existentialist then. You'll see that Adler is pretty much everywhere. He's very existential coded. Existential humanistic coded. You just see that and like you do not belong with them. He's just not a part of individual side. Just feels like existential if you read Adler. But we'll get to that in the next class when we're covering the proper thinkers. We'll get to that. Auto rank too, but auto rank in the sense of his ideas on death, right? Rank's concept of birth trauma or death, for example, they are similar to more academic forms of existential therapy. Like if you look at someone like Ernest Becker, he's not a therapist really, but he's a anthropologist who has written extensively on death. Becker borrows from Rank. But if I had to call, I would have to say it as Adler because Adler is just the diva. He's just the guy. Yeah, he was existential before it was cool. Okay. Last question. We'll make it a little difficult. This was asked in one of the NET exams, by the way. This one question that you see in front of your eyes. In fact, this was asked 3 times in the last 10 years. I was surprised. Come on. What is it? 1, 2, 3. 1, 1. No, you have to only pick one. 1, 2, 3, 4. जो भी है उसमें से एक पकड़ो. Too much confusion. The right answer is 3. We'll cover May stages. These are May stages, no, of development. We'll cover them. Oh wait, sorry, not 3. I misread that. I'm so sorry. How do I erase this? Yeah, 2. Sorry. Innocence, rebellion, ordinary. Yeah. Creative, conscious. Yeah, second one. I'm so sorry. My bad. It's the second one. My bad. I did not read that properly. But yeah, it's the second one. We'll go over the 4 stages of innocence, rebellion, ordinary conscience of self, creative conscience of self. The 4 developmental stages, we'll go over them. Okay. The very first question, what is the difference between existential and existentialism? We use them interchangeably. We say something is existential, but what is the difference? They're not the same. And you need to be careful when you're saying existential. The state of being versus the entire concept, person. Okay. You need to be careful when you're using the word existential. We like to use it, even sometimes, even I call myself an existential therapist, but to be very specific when we're talking about it. State versus school. What do you guys think? Related to existence, existential, and existentialism not related to existence. One is a state and one is a concept. Y'all are close. Y'all are very, very close. Existential is the broader term. It's like an umbrella, right? Within which existentialism is a part. Every culture, every religion that is there, or every ideology or thought has something to say about death, has something to say about meaning, has something to say about freedom or afterlife, or what we call metaphysics, or their way of explaining the universe, or the way of explaining how things work. So whenever I tell people I'm an existential psychologist and existential therapist, they recommend me books of different religions. They're like, read these scriptures, and you'll understand everything about how to live. But when I call myself an existential therapist, I'm referring to this. It's existentialism is a school. It's a 20th century school or philosophy or school of thought, whereas existential includes everything. So when we call ourselves an existential therapist, what are we referring to? Because when I'm talking about existentialism, people come and ask me about spirituality and spiritualism and about afterlife, and I don't subscribe to those as an existential therapist. So you have to be very careful when we're talking about this. Where are we talking about everything under the sun related to death, meaning everything related about afterlife, all of it? Or are we talking about a very specific branch? Usually you will see this being the case. Whether you're reading the works of Yalom, right? Irvin D. Yalom, one of you mentioned him before. If you're reading his works, you will find him referring to the latter, existentialism. If you're reading the newer existential therapists like Mick Cooper, Van Dusen, these are newer people in the field and they tend to subscribe to the latter. And so do I. When I practice existential therapy, I'm referring to the latter, not to the former. We call ourselves existential therapists because it's simpler, it's easier, but we mean very different things. So the colloquial existential crisis and the existentialist crisis are very different. Okay. So what do the existentialists believe in? What do you think? We know that when we are covering existential psych, we're talking about the second part, the existentialism, the school of thought. So, what do they believe in? What do they consider to be hope? Okay, what else? Potentials of human being. Again, the potential of human beings, it sounds very Adlerian, right? Because Adler talks about something known as striving for superiority, striving towards superiority. It's very Adlerian. Like everything we'll talk about today and tomorrow is very Adlerian. Life is what you make of it. Everything is rooted in our existence, how we make meaning of our life. Life is meaningless, so A, die, B, find your own meaning. Okay, very optimistic. Acceptance of anxiety. Existentialists have a very cool way of conceptualizing anxiety. Life, death, origins, existence precedes essence. Very nice. Someone has read Sartre. Individual human agency, free will, purpose, paradox of life, individuality. I'm glad you mentioned individuality because we consider existentialism to be a very individualistic kind of a thing, right? It's Western. So when it comes to a country like ours, applying it to, let's say, when someone is talking about very cultural issues that in India, right? Because in India, for example, arranged marriage is a very big deal. So people who want the freedom to not choose something, which is very common with women, I've seen this with my friends as well, that their parents are forcing them to want, to marry, to get married by the time they're 25, 26, but they want to be able to be free. So here, an existentialist would be able to handle the crisis of freedom, but the problem is that how do we do so without messing with the cultural values that are there, right? That's a very big dilemma that hasn't been given much attention to, because it's very easy to go and just say culture is bad and therefore we should not do this. And I agree that we should prioritize individuality, but the second you try to build that resistance, it's going to push back. Is this a problem that hits very close to home for anyone? Again, you don't have to reply if you don't feel like it, but this is the cultural dilemma that uh, existentialism in India faces. So before we start about it, I think this one quote by What Do We Owe Each Other, that's a good book, but that's more on morality. Before we even start talking about existential, I want to um, refer to this one quote, okay, by Camus, which I feel explains the crux of the whole field, of the whole approach. These are the starting lines of his book, The Myth of Sisyphus. The myth of Sisyphus. These are the very first few lines. He writes, there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living. And that is the fundamental question of philosophy. Everything else, right? Whether the world has three dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, comes afterwards. These are games one must first answer. What is Camus saying here? What is Camus saying? He's saying that everything else is of secondary importance. It's like, you have been told that you have to just play this game, this video game, but and you're trying to figure out, okay, this is how I am playing it and all, but why are you playing it? That is the very first question. So that is the very nature of existential psych or existential philosophy, that something like suicide should be given the consideration and thought, because it is the most. I'm not saying that we should encourage suicide. No, that's not what Camus is saying. That's not what I'm saying. He's saying that the very first question we ought to be even asking is whether life is or is not worth living. And if one of you did mention absurdism, to Camus, the answer is absurdism. To some people, the answer might be something else. You might have your own answers for coming up with why you want to live. But to Camus, that is the starting point of coming up with an answer that justifies this. Everything else comes after that. Which brings us to our very first concept. Does anyone know what the concept is or who gave it? We will talk about ideology. We'll get there. Think of how did not committing suicide become the popular social norm. I think Freud explains that better than existentialism. Freud writes that for any civilization to become, well, a civilization, it needs to be able to hold rules against letting people do whatever they feel is right? Kind of a control over the id. And committing suicide is sometimes an impulsive decision or a decision that goes against the superego, which is the social norm, which is being introjected, right? So it is a kind of a damper on that id or that part of you that's making you choose that. And Freud considers that to be the basis of kind of creating a society. So that then evolves into different forms, like religion telling you that you should not commit suicide, or it's being frowned upon in, let's say, popular culture because it's coming from that dampening. So more than existential, I think Freud has a better answer to that. Yes, thrownness is exactly that. So this is a concept that comes from Heidegger, and we'll meet him soon. Yes, Heidegger. What we just spoke about, right, with Camus. Thrownness is the fact that you are just thrown into the world. You are just thrown into the world without a choice of your own. You were not given permission. When you were young, you were just told this is how life is. You have to get up in the morning, go to school, come back, study, clear 10th, and then they tell you all promises that 10th ke baad maje hi maje. After 10th, your life will be sorted, and then after 12th, your life will be sorted. After graduation, your life will be sorted. After masters, your life will be sorted, and well, clearly not. But you've been playing this game and you've been thrown into it, that you have to go study, get married, find a job, do this, do that, get children, then raise up your children, get them into school, get them to study, blah 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 blah. You are just thrown into these rules without your permission, and usually we are trying our best to deny it, to not look at it, to not understand it. What is this existential crisis? What is the name of this thing that you're covering, huh? What do you think you're doing here? What is the name of this life? So Heidegger is saying that we are just thrown into this thing, into the world, and confronting this thrownness is scary AF, because you realize that everything that you have been doing so far is just been, you know, in a way, it's just happening to you. You've just gone to school, you've just studied, you've done cleared all this. Now you're following some rules, and you're feeling like you're just playing catch up sometimes. That this is there, that is there. My friends are getting married, someone has a kid. What am I doing? Yeah, that does lead to powerlessness. So that is the concept of thrownness. And thrownness relates to being. All of existentialism, in a way, is about being. All of existentialism is about being. And we'll get to it. When we discuss existential psychology later, it will make sense much more. 12 साल स्कूल और 2 डिग्री का कोई मीनिंग नहीं है. You tell me. But when we're talking about being, we're not talking about just some normal being. We're talking about something very specific. We're talking about something very unique, right? Look at what Heidegger writes. He writes, Dasein is a being that does not simply occur amongst other beings. Rather, it is ontically distinguished by the fact that this being is concerned about its very being. Thus, it is constitutive of the being of Dasein to have in its very being a relation of being to this being. Kuch samjha? Nahin. Yeah, being. In fact, I had thought about this. Like, if you ever want to have a fun drinking game, you pick up Heidegger's book, Being and Time, and every time the word being is there, for the first 5 pages, you take a shot. Not the whole book, you will die. Not the first chapter, also, you will die. I'm not even kidding, dude. You just open the book Being and Time, and like the first 3 pages, it's like just being, 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 being. And the thing is, it also kind of, if you're reading in German, it makes sense because he's using different words like sign, Dasein, Dasein. He's using different words for being, which all get translated into being in English. But he's saying something very specific, and I'll tell you what. The reason why we're even starting with this is because in existential psych, Rollo May's concepts are related to Dasein. Rollo May is borrowing from Heidegger to talk about Dasein. Yeah. So before we understand how Rollo May is using it in existential psych, better to ask Heidegger what did he even mean by that. So relax, we'll figure it out. What is Heidegger saying? Very simply, he's saying that there's different kinds of beings that exist. Being is not one thing. It's not one thing. Being can be used as a specific being, like you are a specific being, or it can be used as a category, right? It can be a category or it can be a specific being, like let's say this rat or this raccoon, or it can be a category, like a being of, let's say, humans. That's category. Or numbers, like this specific rat, this rat versus, it's a category. So he's saying that it exists in different forms. For example, here is one kind of being, a rock. It has no awareness of its own, no awareness, zero awareness. Then there's something like numbers, right? They are ideas or abstract entities in a way. They also have a being, but they also have no awareness of themselves. Then there's a raccoon. It doesn't have an awareness of itself, but it has an awareness of the world. And then there's you, which has an awareness of its own being. So now I'll take you back to that line and read it again, right? The fact that its being, this being is concerned about its very own being. That is, it's concerned about its very own being. You are a human who can think about his own existence. You are a human who can think about his own death. You are a human who can think about what it means to be. A cat can't do that. A rock can't do that. A number can't do that, but you can. So a human is a very different type of being than other beings. So you can see the fact that it's being, this being is concerned about its very being. It's concerned about its very being. No other creature is concerned about its very being. Lucky ducks. But humans are. See here. Its being, this being is concerned about its very being. I wouldn't say critical thinking. It's more like you knowing that you are aware of your existence, and that you know that you're thrown into this world. And that brings us to what Heidegger is very critical of. We make this distinction. Yeah, the awareness of thrownness as well, that you were thrown into this world to live this way. An animal is not aware of it. An animal is not aware of death. It's not aware of dying. It just knows it has to escape an animal so that it does not, die. But to it cannot think of its own death. It does not think of its own death. But we do. Dasein is not another person. Okay, this is confusing. Do I need to explain that again? Yeah, they have an instinct to save themselves, but they do not think about not dying. You know how what some people do is they don't think about death exactly. They think about, oh my God, if I die, my parents will, grieve about me. They'll have to prepare for this. These people will come for my funeral. Are you familiar with this kind of an experience? If something happens to me, how will my family go on? Who will take care of them? How will my mother cry and all of that? But animals don't do that. How do we know? We assume that. We can't know anything. First class. You think I was not prepared for that? Yeah. So that is the difference. That is the thrownness. That is the Dasein. So to Heidegger, he is critical of this distinction of objective and subjective. Earlier psychologists, earlier thinkers have made this distinction between, let's say, object like the real world, and you are the subject who is seeing that real world or interacting with it. But to Heidegger, this is nonsense. He's critical of it. He's saying the two are not different. He's saying you are in the world. If there is no object and subject, you are inside the world. You don't exist outside of it. He's saying that you are not in the theater over here watching the movie, which is the world. You are inside the movie. So the objective and the subjective are the same thing to him, because the objective and the subjective don't exist without the other. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is there to hear it, the tree has not made noise. Why? Because noise is a thing only humans can hear. Human or an animal, right? Otherwise, it's just air. So if a tree falls in a forest and no one is there to hear it, it does not make noise. Noise cannot exist beyond ears. So that is what Heidegger is critical of, that there is no object and there is no subject. They are both interdependent to a point that it's just the same thing almost. You are not watching the movie, you are in the movie, aware that you are in, this is happening to you. And you'll see this happen time and again in a good number of existential literature. R.D. Laing's The Divided Self, the very first chapter, he's critical of this as well. So when you talk about projective scales which as being subjective and objective scales, the psychometric scales as being objective, that's nonsense. That's not really accurate. No, if something is being produced, then it's not noise. It's just air. What is noise? Noise is the air vibration reaching our ear and converting it into noise to us. If it does not, if no one is there to perceive it, it's not noise then. It's just air vibration. Yeah, there would be shifting of particles. That's all. Nothing more left. It's this play about us. Yeah. If it's not heard, it does not exist. It's not a sound until we process it. Exactly. So that's what he's talking about here. Okay. We'll talk about something lighter. Let's talk about something lighter, something not so heavy. No. Okay. What do you think when you think of that? It's a very important theme in existential philosophy and psychology. New life, fun, ghosts, long sleep, flowers. Okay, people coming to put flowers on your grave. Okay, grief, peace, absence, need, inevitable. We have to die, so we must live. Okay, liberation, inevitable, freedom, love, longing, escape from suffering, game ka second stage, void. Okay, rebirths. To the existentialists, they have a good number of things that they think about death. To them, some existentialists at least, everyone is in a way denying it. And that is what drives us. You might feel like, some people might think that, I need to have a child so that a part of me lives on afterwards, or I need to make a piece of art so that this lives, even after I'm gone, or I need to leave a legacy behind so that even if I'm dead, my name remains behind. So these are all ways of, in a way, denying it. To the existentialist, death is a reminder of the fact that we are not one, but we are two. We as humans are not one entity, but we are two entities. There is one part of us that is symbolic. In your mind right now, you can think about flying in the sky. You can think about becoming a celebrity. You can think about, dreaming to be whatever, a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, clearing the MPhil, clearing JRF. You can think everything in your mind right now. You can do anything. And the other part of you is this, sick body that can just die any second. You're here thinking that, tomorrow I'll go do this. You never know. You're just like in front of a car and gone. So this awareness that we are a frail body that can die any second is scary. This is a line by Becker. He writes that in our minds, we soar the skies, but at the end of the day, we are just food for worms. And that is not something that we feel very comfortable, remembering or knowing. Transition to, again, anything after that is not something that I'm going to touch because we don't know. Keeping personal beliefs aside. Not if you cremated. Hmm. So everyone is in a way propelled or moved or motivated by death in some shape or form. That is the idea that uh, a good number of existentialists believe. And sometimes this death does not even have to be real. It can be in a way metaphysical death or a psychological death. Something that you have believed for so long, something that is your identity is gone. Or something very interestingly that you see is that when your partner dies, right? When you, let's say with older couples, when their partner dies, their wife or their husband, they tend to die within the next year usually. Very often. Very often you see this. Yeah, that's very common. Okay. Will to power. This is a very interesting idea by Nietzsche. To Nietzsche, we are not driven by wanting to survive. We are driven by this will to power. Now, when he's saying will to power, he's not referring to power to, control, or the power to, let's say, take over, or, have power over others. He's not using that word. To him, will to power is more expressive, more creative. It's expressing and asserting that it's here, it exists. And he's saying that we are driven by that. Look at what he writes. He's saying that psychologists should be think themselves, that think again before putting down the instinct of self-preservation, right? We say we are living because we want to survive, survival instinct or whatever. He's saying that instead of putting down the instinct of self-survival, self-preservation as the cardinal, as the first instinct of an organic being, a living thing seeks above all to discharge its strength. Life itself is will to power. Self-preservation is only one of the indirect and most frequent results thereof. He's saying self-preservation is coming from that. Yeah, it can be. So he's saying that let us be aware of the superfluous teleological principles. Like here, you can see someone had asked me before, right? Nietzsche specifically is being a little cautious of some teleology, like, we are living so that we don't die. He's being careful of it. He's not saying that. Here, because we tend to use self-preservation or survival as the thing. It is thus in effect that method ordains, okay, that's not important. But he is more concerned with the will to power. It's a dynamic, very creative process of expression, of expansion, and not because we want to survive. So someone had asked me about teleology before for this, and this is how Nietzsche thinks about it. But if we take the fact that, yeah, life is an expression, but if we take the fact that most existentialists are in a way borrowing from Adler, it does end up becoming teleological. We'll cover that in the last slide. Here, Adler versus Frankel. Adler is saying what? He's borrowing from Nietzsche for will to power, which we just covered, right? And we are spoken about Frankel taking what? Will to meaning. Now, Adlerian will to power is more teleological. Why? Because he's saying that we are striving towards superiority. Here again, uh, power, striving, superiority, they are not in the way that you're better than others, but rather a mastery over something, a mastery over life. So both of them, by the way, are borrowing from Nietzsche. So that's the funny thing. But to Adler, we are living so that we can strive to be this thing, to have to express and to expand and get this mastery over life. So even though it's a little teleological from him, he's still borrowing quite heavily from Nietzsche's will to power. Whereas Frankel is saying that we are living because we live to, it's again, Frankel is very teleological. He's saying that we are living so that we get some sense of meaning. Now, who is right? We don't know. I personally side with Adler. But yeah, that is what the Adlerian view is. Some sense of, sorry. Both of them are in a way quite teleological. Yeah, I side with Adler as well. I don't side with Frankl. In fact, I'm not even a fan of logotherapy, but I will cover it in the next class anyway. But if I had to, I would pick Adler. Adlerian concepts are much more beneficial for existential. Okay, since we are near the end of our time, I will quickly go over three: self-preservation and power. Yeah. What would Adler do in a? I don't know. So, what Geetika has asked about self-preservation. So, we are saying that when we are talking about self-preservation, right, that is survival. We are saying that humans are living for survival, that we don't want to die, that whenever there's a knife coming us, we move out of the way because we are driven by not wanting to die. We're driven to survive. But Nietzsche is saying that we are looking in the wrong way. He's saying the end goal is not to survive, not to avoid death, but to the will to power. Over here, power is not a power over other people kind of a power. It's more of a power to express, to the creative energy just expanding and leaving out of you to build or create or live. So he's saying we're not doing that to survive. And he's saying survival can look like it, can come under it, but mainly we are doing it for the will to power. This particular quote is from Beyond Good and Evil. It's the 13th aphorism. ठीक है. Okay, what does this person ask? Okay. I'm very sorry, but can you elaborate the difference between existentialism and existential? Existentialism is a particular branch of school which includes, beliefs about existence. It's in opposition to the essentialist belief. I'll get to that in a second. 1 second. I'll conclude with that a little better when I'm talking about Sartre next. But over here, let me tell you very quickly about Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is known as the father of existentialism. So May took from Adler, who took from Nietzsche. Yes, May also took from Nietzsche and Kierkegaard. So when we talk about May next time, we're talking about Kierkegaard as well, because May's idea of anxiety comes from Kierkegaard. To Kierkegaard, anxiety is the dread of the possible. It's the dread of the possible. So what Kierkegaard is writing that it's like standing at the cliff. Imagine that you're standing at the tip of a mountain or a cliff and you're looking down, or on top of your terrace and you're looking down, and you feel fear because you're worried that you might fall. It's the possibility of falling that's filling you up with this anxiety. And he's saying that anxiety is this dread, is a fear of all the things that are possible. And this fear cannot be quenched. Why? Because there's so many things that are possible. Think of your anxiety before your exam. Think of the net. You're anxious about all the possible questions they can ask. Why? There's an infinite number of questions that they can ask. So till you end up going and giving the exam, you're going to feel anxiety about it because you don't really know what it's going to be. It's not something concrete. A fear is something concrete, right? You're afraid of this thing. I'm afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of this, let's say, animal, or let's say cockroach or whatever. It's a very specific thing. But anxiety, it's uncertain. It can be about anything. Yeah, about something that hasn't happened yet. Or it can be anything in general, of all the things that could happen. Fear of the unknown, yes, is a type of it, because what is unknown? It's all the possible things that could happen. If I tell this person, this girl or guy, that I like them, they will either say yes, or they will get mad at me, they will make fun of me, they'll go and tell other people. There's so many possibilities, and you feel that anxiety prop right up, and you feel it in your chest. And May is borrowing this conceptualization of anxiety. Yeah, pretty much. Okay. I'll quickly end with Sartre, with especially the question that someone had asked me. So before the existentialists, right, there were something known as the essentialists. Very simply to tell you, like take a chair for example. It has four. It's a very bad rung of a chair, and you know what a chair looks like, right? It has a blueprint. The essentialists believe that humans also had a blueprint. Humans have a way of being human. What is the way a chair can be? It has four legs or three legs or whatever, and you sit on it. And humans also have such a purpose that is given to them. The way the chair's purpose is that you sit on it. Similar with a pencil or a pen, what is their blueprint or a design or a purpose that they have that you use? You write something with it. But Sartre is coming and saying very uh, something very different when we're talking about existentialism. He has this very famous quote: existence comes before essence. This essence is this essence. It's saying that our ability to choose, our free ability to live, our free will is comes before, is more important, is how things are as compared to having a blueprint. There is no blueprint of a human. There is no blueprint. There is no innate purpose given to you. So when we are saying is something existential or is it existentialism, this is the difference. We're talking about this very specific belief that you have no innate blueprint, the innate purpose. But when I'm saying existential, it can have, because something religious can be existential, but religion will give you an innate purpose that you are doing this for some deity or some belief in something. But existentialism does not have that. It's saying that you are free and you are given the way ability to choose your own life and decide how you wish to live. Does that make it clear the difference between existential and existentialism? Pretty much, yes. That's what he's saying, that existence is more important for it than essence as compared to the other way around when it comes to humans. Someone had put up a question, 1 second. I'll go over will to power and will to meaning a little later tomorrow. In tomorrow's class, I think tomorrow or day after, one of the classes. Because right now it's already past 7 and the other new professor is already here to take over. But are we clear with the basic concepts over here of this so far? When I'm covering Adler and May again, I'll go over will to power and will to meaning again quickly. But has the concept of existential philosophy made sense? Something to think about for you as well? Awesome. Can't believe we got compared to furniture. Well, they're useful. Unlike humans. What makes a thing it is? Yep. Should we read up on something if you want to? I mean, any personality text you just see, you'll find a Rollo May in that. Can you give a quick summary by showing the slides? I'll just send the slides, or anyways the video will be available. You can go over it again. Okay. Awesome. Again, covering existential psyche and like existential philosophy in 1 hour is quite the challenge. But because there's like so much to cover, there's so much history, there's so much things. I didn't even touch phenomenology yet. There's so much to do. And oh, by the way, Adler was pretty much, I think, the first one to bring existential phenomenology into psychodynamic things. So again, but yeah, there's so much to cover that. But this is a very simple but properly introduced idea of existential philosophy, which is necessary because we don't cover Heidegger properly. Heidegger's Dasein or Heidegger's being is not given proper importance. Heidegger's thrownness, existential psychology. Existential psychology is teleological. Teleology is basically that you are striving for some end goal. Every theory has a teleological basis, right? What is Freud's? Freud does not have teleology. Freud is more causality, that we are in a way trying to resolve these conflicts from before. Jung is the saying that we are striving for some kind of a teleological thing. Adler is saying that we are striving for superiority. So that is teleological, that there is an end goal that we are striving for. Frankl is teleological. Why? Because he's saying we are striving to get some meaning, some purpose, or trying to find that purpose. So teleology is a spectrum. Yes. Correct. So an existential is more about creating your own meaning. So in a way, that would be teleological for that. Yeah, psychology is most of the time disguised. What you told me? You tell me. What did Sam do for all this while, or you're just listening to his ASMR voice? Hmm? Are you listening also, comprehending anything? Yeah, yeah, I've seen the chats. I have seen the chats. And I'm questioning the kind of books you are reading. And for educational purposes, might need the links. Okay, I will wrap up here. Is the class clear about existential philosophy, or at least the basics of it? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Tomorrow, I'll cover properly with the existential psychology with Rolome, Frankel, the questions that they do ask, right? Paradoxical intention, the questions about this stages, main stages that they ask. We'll cover all of that properly. Okay. Now I will give it to the other person who is going to be taking the second lecture. Which personality book? Anything is fine. Lindsay's fine. Ewan is fine. Schulzen, no, not Schulzen. Schulz. Feast is fine. Okay. Now let me give it. Start the second lecture also for the other person. Otherwise, they won't have time. Okay. The second person we have is Snehal Zog. She is a professor as well who has been teaching for a very long time now. Hi, Snehal. Wait, I need to unmute you. And she's a good friend as well. She is here to teach biopsych, and she makes it fun. Some of you are, in fact, her students, from what I came to know. Wait, by the two of you, which one do I make a co-host? Can you unmute? Okay, I think I made the wrong one. One sec. Okay, try unmuting.
Yes, I'm
Oh, there.
able to do it. Thank you. Yes. Hi.
Yes, so Neil will be
Uh,
covering biopsych, yes. And I'll be
yes.
giving it
Okay.
up to you. She's also cleared JRF, by the way.
Okay.
Very cool person.
Thank you.
Chalo, take it over.
Okay. Yes. Guys, before we start, do you all need a 2-3 minute break? And then we can start. Hi, everyone. Everyone who's saying hi to me. Hi, Paruma. Hi, Cherry. Okay. So we can take a 2-3 minute break. And we can start by 7:12, if that's fine with everyone. Yes, no? Give me a thumbs up if that's fine. All right. Okay. तब तक I'll share my screen. Okay. All right, fine. Let's begin. Are we all back? Okay. So, hi everyone. This is Snehal, and I will be teaching you biopsychology for the rest of the week whenever we meet. And oh, I'm glad some of you find this subject interesting. All right. Um, we're going to start with very basic things today. Um the plan that I have in my head is that first I'll start teaching neurons, the structure of the neuron, action potential, graded potential, resting potential, and then we will take things ahead from there. Then we look at the CNS, PNS. Then we look at the different areas of the brain, and then we look at what happens if there are lesions in those areas of the brain, what all tests we can do, and so on and so forth. And we will look at sensory systems very briefly, and the endocrine system also very briefly throughout our lectures. So today I plan to teach you neuron, structure of the neuron, and action potential and resting potential. Okay, I know this is very basic, but I'm also sure that every time you've read it, at that point of time, it is clear in your head, okay, action potential is this, resting potential is this. But still, after many, many days, if you come across something, uh, you find it confusing. कि अरे क्या था? कितने millivolts थे? -55 था या -70 था? Right? So, we are primarily going to look at all of these things. ठीक है? So, let's begin. Like I said, today's class is going to be on neurons and neuronal communication. But first, we are going to start with MCQs, just to check what is your understanding. Again, these are very, very easy. I'm sure most of you will be able to answer it. And let's see, just in case you don't know the answer, hum isi ke liye to aaye idhar, for us to study and so that we can answer the questions better. All right? Okay. Fine, let's begin. The first question is, where in the neuron does the action potential usually start? Dendrites, axon terminal, axon hillock, or synapse? What do you think? I'll wait for some more people to answer. Okay, so most of you are correct. The answer is axon hillock. Okay. Next question. Which part of the neuron is primarily responsible for receiving incoming signals from other neurons? Correct. Perfect. Wow, everyone is answering this. Correct. Dendrites. Very good. Next. What happens when a neuron reaches its threshold potential? This is a little difficult, isn't it? Do you all know what is a threshold potential, by the way? Correct. It triggers an action potential. C. Next. What is the space between two neurons called? Come on, guys, please. This is very easy. Yes, correct. Synapse. Next. What role does the myelin sheath play in neural communication? Yes, very good. It speeds up the signal transmission. Good job. So now that we've understood कि हमें structure तो बहुत अच्छे से पता है, and it seems like action potential is also something that you are aware about. ठीक है? So let's start with our class, and let's start with the very basic, which is structure of the neuron. Now I would like to give you a heads up. मेरी drawing इतनी अच्छी नहीं है with the stylus, so please do not judge me. but I will ensure that whatever I'm drawing on the screen is understood. Okay? हम यहाँ पे elementary intermediate नहीं दे रहे, तो no comments about how bad my drawing is. Thank you. Okay. So yeah, and I will be, even though I'm not ऐसे Picasso level का मेरा drawing नहीं है, फिर भी मैं बहुत चीजें draw करती रहूंगी, because that is what biopsychology is all about. Okay, so fine. Let's start with the structure of the neuron. Can anyone, like, you all can type it in the text box, chat box. What all structures do you know? What all structures are there in the neuron? Axon, correct. Dendrite, synapse, correct. Soma, very good. Myelin sheath, yes. Perfect, perfect. So, here goes. Okay. This is our neuron, right? Okay. It looks something like this, correct? Now, this is our cell body, which is our soma. These are called dendrites, correct? This area here, this is basically our cell membrane. Okay, these are our terminal buttons, right? Now, some neurons are myelinated neurons. Myelinated in the sense they have myelin sheath surrounding them. Okay, so myelin sheath यहाँ होता है. Okay, I'm going to write it as MS. Okay, this is the basic structure that all of us are aware about so far. Yes, correct, correct. These are nodes of Ranvier here. This part. Okay, and yeah, these are terminal buttons. This is the basic structure of neuron that all of us are aware about, isn't it? Fine. So basically, neurons are the building blocks of our brain and our entire nervous system. And our brain is made up of millions of these little nerve cells. Okay. Now, each neuron usually varies according to its function. We have sensory neurons, we have motor neurons. However, we can make some generalizations, which is this, what I've drawn on the screen. We have dendrites, myelin sheath, axon, and the cell body. Now, the axon from each neuron is connected to other neurons, right? So a neuron's function is what? Basically to communicate with another neuron, and this way, okay, a communication network gets formed, which sort of results in our overt behavior. Now, how do neurons even communicate with each other? Neurons communicate with each other through electrical energy, right? Now, एक chemical reaction होता है, ठीक है, for this communication to even happen in the first place. That is called action potential. Action potential में क्या होता है हम थोड़ा डिटेल में आगे देखेंगे, ठीक है. So basically, if I have to give you an overview, एक neural impulse sort of travels in a wave-like fashion. एक बार वो start हो गया कि उसको stop नहीं कर सकते, and when the nerve impulse reaches the next neuron, it sort of has an all or nothing effect. ठीक है, मतलब it either stimulates the next neuron or it stops the neuron from firing. Now ये सब तुम लोग ने सुना होगा, and I'm sure you all have read up on it as well. But ये आज के लेक्चर में हम ब्रेक करके पढ़ेंगे, ठीक है? Alright. Fine. So this part is clear, the structure of the neuron part. Yes? Any questions here? I think this is pretty basic. All of us have done this before. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the next part, which is the most important part. सबसे पहले we'll start talking about resting potential. Resting membrane potential. Does anyone know what it is about? Like any idea? Okay, fine. First, let's understand. Correct. The ions present across membrane. Okay, fine. Okay, first let's understand what is a membrane potential in the first place. Membrane potential is basically the difference of electrical charge between the inside and the outside of the neuron. Okay, also, let's do a fun thing. We will call one individual neuron Nora. Okay? जैसे डोरा द एक्सप्लोरर थी ना, वैसे we'll call her नोरा द एक्सप्लोरर. ठीक है, अपना एक न्यूरॉन को हम नोरा बोलेंगे. ठीक है, अभी हम जो भी बात करेंगे अबाउट द रेस्टिंग मेम्ब्रेन पोटेंशियल, एक्शन पोटेंशियल, ये पूरी स्टोरी है हमारी. Sorry, yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but some people are not like from, they don't know Hindi very well. So if I say in English, maybe बोल बता दो.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Yes. Fine. I'm so sorry. I was not aware of this. I'll speak in English. Okay. So I was saying that we'll call our individual neuron Nora the explorer, and our entire story of neuronal communication is going to be about Nora. All right. Now, Nora is this person whose main job is to pass on messages from one person to another person. Okay. Okay, so we were talking about the resting membrane potential. And I told you that it is the difference of electrical charge between the inside and the outside of a neuron. So even before we understand this, we first need to understand what are ions. Okay. Ions, matlab, when we have, okay, think of atoms. When atoms lose or gain electrons, they become an ion. Okay. Now, when an atom loses electron, atom loses an electron, what happens is it gains a positive charge. Okay. That, when that happens, we call it a cation. Okay. Now, when an atom gains an electron, it gains a negative charge. And when that happens, we call it an anion. Okay. Is this part clear? Yes. Okay. So ion is basically when an atom loses or gains electrons. If you lose an electron, you gain a positive charge. It is called cation. If you gain an electron, you gain a positive charge, a negative charge, and we call it an anion. Okay. Ye ions wala concept is clear? Yes. Okay. Now, okay, think about this like this. When a neuron is at rest, okay, क्या होता है? Let's say this is the inside of our neuron, okay. Now, when it is at rest, the inside of the neuron is more negatively charged, and the outside of the neuron is more positively charged. Okay. So you can think of it in this way, that outside of the neuron, you have sodium ions, you have chloride ions, and you have calcium ions. Okay. Inside of the neuron, you have potassium ions, and you have A-, which is basically negatively charged anions. All right. This is how it usually is. Okay. So when the neuron is at rest, like I said, the neuron is more negatively charged. So it causes the resting membrane potential to be around -70 MV, which is millivolts. So the inside of the ion is negatively charged, bahar ka is positively charged. This entire thing is a resting state. and this resting state is usually at minus 70 millivolts. Okay. Now, you might think, how is this potential, this resting potential even maintained in the first place? There is something known as the sodium potassium pump. Okay, have you all heard about this before? The sodium potassium pump? Yes. So this sodium potassium pump, what it does is that it transports all the proteins, okay, that uses energy to constantly pump sodium ions and constantly pump potassium ions. Okay, fine. Some of you are texting, are putting messages here, but while I'm teaching, it is difficult for me to read the messages. So I'll come back to it later, okay? I'll first teach and then I'll go through the chat. Okay. So I was saying the sodium potassium pump, what it does is it constantly pumps for positive ions and it constantly pumps negative ions, potassium ions. So basically, at any point of time, it pumps 3 sodium ions out of the cell while pumping 2 potassium ions into the cell. Okay? So, इसके वजह से होता क्या है? There are more positive ions being pumped out than inside of it. And all of this helps maintain the membrane potential at negative 70 millivolts. Okay. Now, it is very easy for potassium ions to cross the cell membrane through the ion channels. ठीक है? अभी होगा क्या? Potassium will pass out of the neuron until it reaches the point where there is an equilibrium. Okay? And once that equilibrium is reached, that is where we say that, okay, the neuron is at resting potential, which is minus 65 millivolts to minus 70 millivolts. ठीक है? तो ये हो गया अपना resting potential का part. Now, this is the point at which our action potential will begin. Okay, but before we go there, I will draw this graph, okay, for you to understand exactly what is it that we're talking about. Okay, think of our x-axis to be showing time, and our y-axis basically shows our membrane potential. Okay, which is measured in millivolts. Now, I told you that resting potential is here, which is minus 70 MV. Resting potential is here. Then we have minus 55 MV. Okay. Here we have 0. And here we have plus 30 MV. Okay. Now, right now, our neurons are here at the resting state. Correct? Abhi. Action potential is what? When there is a momentary reversal of the membrane potential. And why is that necessary? For the neurons to even communicate with one another, right? So action potential is the very basic or very basis of electrical signaling within the neurons, right? So what happens is that when neurotransmitters bind to receptors on the dendrites of another neuron, we have one neuron, correct? Terminal button से neurotransmitters release होते हैं, and then when these neurotransmitters bind to the receptors of the dendrites of another neuron, okay, we say that depolarization has happened. Okay, depolarization. Depolarization means what? That the membrane potential which existed it has become less polarized now. Okay. So, less polarized meaning when neurotransmitters are interacting with the receptors, okay, of the next neuron. बार बार depolarization होता रहेगा, right? Repeated depolarization of the neuron will happen. And when this depolarization keeps happening, it eventually makes the neuron reach a threshold. Okay. That threshold is basically your minus 55 millivolts. Okay. Now, when this threshold is reached, okay, this is where we say that our action potential has begun. Okay. It is called the rising phase of action potential. So, first we start the resting membrane potential is here at minus 70 MV. Now, because of repeated depolarization, what will happen is that it will now start rising. This is our rising phase of action potential. And here, this is our threshold. Okay, minus 55 MV, right? Then it will go up, right? Massive depolarization of the neuron is happening to a point where the membrane potential now reaches 0. Okay. This entire part is our rising phase of our action potential. Okay. Now, यहाँ पे basically अभी क्या होने वाला है कि a large number of sodium channels are going to start opening. Okay. And a large number of sodium ions are now going to start coming inside the cell. Okay. And that is why this entire depolarization is even happening in the first place. Okay. So, क्या होगा? This influx of positive ions, okay, creates sort of this electrical signal, which is in fact called action potential, which helps, which then eventually travels down the neuron. Okay. Now, when this action potential reaches its peak, okay, here at 30 millivolts, okay, once the action potential reaches its peak, the sodium channels are now going to start closing, okay, and as soon as the sodium channels start closing, your potassium channels are going to start opening, allowing potassium to flow out of the cell. Okay. So now what is happening is that there is loss of positive potassium ions, okay, outside of the cell. ठीक है? जिसकी वजह से क्या होगा? There will be something known as repolarization. Okay. Now, when this happens, when repolarization happens, that is when any channels close and K channels open, and potassium is now flowing out of the cell. Okay. That is when we say that the falling phase of action potential has begun. Okay. Now, क्या होगा? After this repolarization is happening, the neuron will again come back to the resting membrane potential state. Okay. However, it will not just come to a resting potential state. It will go even further than that. It will go down. Okay. And that is when something known as hyperpolarization happens. Okay. Now, when this hyperpolarization happens, it basically means that now it is going to be very difficult to cause the neuron to fire again. ठीक है? इसी को we call it the absolute refractory period. Refractory period. Okay. Now here what will happen? What happens is that the sodium channels had already closed and the potassium channels had opened. Now eventually the potassium ions, the potassium channels are also going to close. Okay. And the membrane is now coming back to resting potential state. Okay. And while it is getting ready to be activated again, उसके पहले ये जो स्टेट होता है उसको हम hyperpolarization कहते हैं. ठीक है. So this signal which is generated by the action potential eventually travels down the neuron, and then it causes the release of neurotransmitters at the axonal terminal, which then passes on to the next neuron. Okay. Are we understanding this? Yes, no? Okay. Now, if you all have any doubts, you can ask it. I've opened the chat box. I'll walk you through this again. I'm sure it may be confusing for some people in the first go. So if you all have any questions, you can ask me here. Okay, someone has asked, what is polarization? Okay. Okay. Remember how I told you that a membrane potential is nothing but the electrical difference? Polarization is just that. It is just the idea that there is some electrical difference between the inside of the neuron and outside of the neuron. Okay. So when the neuron is at rest, ठीक है, मतलब अपनी जो Nora the explorer है, when our Nora is resting, okay, she is not sending any signal, she is in a resting state. That resting state is basically our polarization. The inside of the neuron is going to be negative compared to the outside. Okay, why is that so? Because there are more negative ions inside and there are more positive ions outside. Okay. Then what is depolarization? Okay. When this Nora gets a signal, okay, she'll start opening up her channels. She'll let positive ions, which are sodium ions, inside. So what will happen is that our neuron will now become more positive. The inside of the neuron is going to be more positive. When that happens, it is called depolarization. Now, Nora is all excited. Okay. Nora starts firing. Abhi kya hoga? After all the firing and everything is done, she wants to go back to her resting state, isn't it? So she will start pumping positive potassium ions out to make the inside of the neuron negative again. When that happens, it is called repolarization. Okay. अभी क्या होगा? बहुत potassium ions have gone outside, right? So after repolarization, immediately resting potential पे नहीं जाएगा. Sometimes the inside of the neuron is going to become extra negative, but only for a very short period of time, of course, but it will become extra negative. And when that happens, it is called hyperpolarization. Okay. Now this hyperpolarization is basically our absolute refractory period, जहाँ पे neuron का fire होना becomes very difficult. This is very, very short time this happens for. Okay, and before it returns back to normal. So basically polarization is just the electric state where the inside of the neuron is more negative compared to the outside. Did I answer the question? What is polarization? Yes? All right. So the pump puts Na out of the cell and the channel lets it in as in. Okay, wait. Can you explain Okay. I did explain hyperpolarization again, Divya. Do you want me to explain it again? And the absolute refractory period? Okay, you got it? All right. Okay, got it. Yes, I will draw the graph again for you all to understand it better. Just a minute. Okay. This is our x-axis, this is our y-axis, this is time. Okay. And this is basically your membrane potential. which is in millivolts. Okay. Now, here is minus 70 millivolts. Minus 70 millivolts पे क्या है? Resting potential है. Correct? So here, this is our resting potential. Then we have minus 55 millivolts. Okay. This is basically the threshold for excitation. At minus 70, Nora is chilling. Okay. But at minus 55, abhi threshold cross ho gaya. Now she'll start getting excited. Okay. So it starts from here. Okay. And then it goes upar like this. Now there is 0. This is the point at which, okay, this, then you have plus 30 millivolts here. Okay. This is the plus 30 millivolts place is where our peak, our action potential reaches its peak. Okay. And then sort of will start coming down. Here, repolarization hoga. Okay. You go down, 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 down. And like I said, there will be a point when before it comes back to normal, it will go further down. Okay, because the inside of the neuron has become extremely negative. So this place is where we say hyperpolarization has happened. Okay, like this. Is this graph clear? Yes? Okay, great. Any other questions on this? Yes, no? Okay. Someone has asked, can resting potential be different for neurodivergence? We'll have to check actually. Because see, typically resting membrane potential for most neurons is always around minus 70 MV, right? However, I think there may be subtle differences which are involved in certain neuronal electrical properties. जैसे अगर altered ion channel function हुआ, ठीक है? Like for example, I think there was some research which said that people who have autism spectrum disorders usually have some mutation in the sodium channel ka genes. ठीक है? So if that is there, or of course neurotransmitter imbalances. For example, GABA or glutamate imbalances usually influence the baseline membrane activity also. So if the inhibition is reduced in some way, neurons might be more excitable. Okay, so they're going to be more closer to threshold, right? So yeah, but I think for me to be able to give you a crisp answer, I will also have to read up on it. Okay. Unnati, was I able to answer your question even a little bit? Are you still here? Yes. All right. Okay. Great. Great. Again, I'm taking some last questions. I'm just reading the chat box. Okay. Divya, do you still have the doubt about sodium channels? Okay, you had a doubt regarding the difference between transport mechanism of sodium potassium pump and channels. Okay, fine. Okay. See, there is a protein pump which uses energy to move the ions against their concentration gradients. Okay. Now, what it does is that it pushes 3 sodium ions, like I said, out of the neuron, and it brings in 2 potassium ions inside the neuron. this entire mechanism helps to create and maintain a negative resting potential. Okay. So this sodium potassium pump is basically always working in the background. It is not really a part of the action potential spike in itself. It is always working in the background. Okay. This helps to keep the inside of the cell more negative. So basically think of it as अपनी नोरा का बैटरी चार्जर. ठीक है, वो ऐसे conditions, it maintains the conditions which are necessary for action potentials to even happen in the first place. And then there is something known as sodium channels, which are basically voltage gated. These are special protein channels which sort of open or close depending on the voltage, depending on the membrane potential. So basically what happens is at a resting state, these sodium channels are going to be closed. Okay, once the threshold is reached, the channels open, sodium ions start rushing in because there is more of sodium ions outside the cell than inside the cell. This entire thing is going to cause depolarization because now sodium ions are coming inside, so the inside of the neuron becomes more positive. Eventually, when this peak is reached, the peak which I drew here at plus 30 MV, once the peak is reached, these sodium channels are going to inactivate. That is, they are going to close themselves off, right? And this is the point at which repolarization happens, when basically what is going to happen is that our potassium channels are going to open. These are also voltage gated, okay? And the potassium starts going out of the cell. This restores negative charge, okay? And all of this will basically help reset our neuron, okay? वापस अपना sodium potassium pump is going to kick in to rebalance ions after this spike. Okay? So basically, sodium channels kya karte hain? They are responsible for the action potential spike. What do sodium pumps do? They are responsible for resetting and maintaining resting conditions. Are we clear with this? Yeah? All right, great. Okay, fine. So yeah, basically that's about it. Again, quickly to revise whatever we've done so far, we looked at the structure of our neuron. Yes, where we spoke about how there is a soma, there are dendrites, right? Dendrites are basically like your Nora the Explorer's ears. वो gossip सुनने के लिए उसके कान हमेशा खुले रहते हैं. The more gossip you get, the more excited she's going to be, right? And you have your axon here, right? These are basically your terminal buttons here, right here. Yes. Some myelinated neurons are also there. So यहाँ पे myelin sheath भी होगा. And in between there are rods of Ranvier which help the impulse move faster. It speeds up the signals. And there are terminal buttons here. Okay. Where basically your neurotransmitters यही से बाहर जाएंगे. Okay. And after understanding the structure, we spoke about how based on function, our neurons can be little different. There can be sensory neurons, there can be motor neurons, there can be interneurons, but there are a few generalizations which can be made, which are these basically. That every neuron is always going to have a dendrite, an axon, terminal button, soma, etc. Okay. This soma is basically your Nora the Explorer's control room. ठीक है, ये डिसाइड करेगा कि भाई हमें ये इंफॉर्मेशन इंपॉर्टेंट है कि नहीं. ठीक है. So dendrites are basically going to listen to the messages from other neurons. The more messages come in, more excited Nora gets, right? Then cell body, which is soma, Nora's control room, जिसमें nucleus होगा, it basically runs the entire decision making process. It basically thinks about, okay, should I send this message forward? Then comes our axon hillock, which is basically like your Nora's decision booth. Okay, if all the messages from her dendrites add up very strongly, then Nora sort of gives a green signal. Okay, let's fire. Okay, and axon is like your Nora's message highway. Okay, it is long, it is thin. Sometimes it may be covered with myelin sheath, which is basically like your insulation tape, and that helps speed up messages. And then comes your axon terminal. Okay, which are जहाँ पे synaptic buttons होगा, which are basically like your Nora's fingers. It is going to like reach out to the next neuron. It is going to poke the next neuron, ready to deliver the message. ठीक है? And so that was basically the structure of the neuron. And then we moved on to the resting membrane potential. So basically Nora अपनी chill कर रही है, ठीक है? She's not sending messages to anyone. So she's at resting potential. तो उसका resting का rule क्या है? In order for Nora to rest, the inside of the neuron has to be negatively charged. The outside has to be more positively charged. ठीक है? And that resting potential is minus 70 MV. So Nora is like, I am not going to do anything unless something interesting happens. Okay. Now Nora is going to start getting messages from her other neighbors. Some of them are going to be very exciting. Ki, oh, acha gossip hai, sunte hain. Okay. Now, when that happens, basically, our entire process begins, where action potential is now going to begin. It is like the entire thing which we studied here. Okay. So after a point depolarization होगा, फिर hyperpolarization होगा, फिर absolute refractory period होगा, right? So that is the entire process. Okay, Divya is asking me something. Can you explain this bit? During depolarization, what gates are opened to allow Na plus ions inside? What gates are opened in the sense? The sodium ion channels are opened. Did you get this, or do you still have a doubt? There's a voltage triggered at minus 55 MV, right? Minus 55 MV? Yes, correct. Correct. See, during depolarization, your voltage gated sodium channels are going to open. So basically, your membrane potential will start to rise from minus 70 MV and it will move towards minus 55 MV. And when at threshold, which is minus 55 MV, when it reaches, then your voltage gated Na plus channels are going to open. And that is when your Na plus ions are going to rush in. Okay. And this helps the inside of the neuron become more positive. And eventually then the membrane potential sort of shoots up to plus 30 MV. Is it clear? Correct. Sodium channels and sodium pumps are two different things. I think this is where you're all getting confused at, right? Correct. So basically the difference between them is that your sodium potassium pump, okay, it is always working. It is always working continuously to maintain the resting state. ठीक है, तो उसके लिए कोई ट्रिगर की जरूरत नहीं है. It is always active. And its primary role is to push sodium out of the cell because the main purpose is to maintain resting potential. ठीक है? Whereas your sodium channel, it is going to open briefly during the depolarization phase. Okay. And for it, trigger is required. It will only open when voltage hits its threshold, which is minus 55 MV. And the main point of sodium channel is to allow sodium to enter inside of the cell. Whereas what does sodium potassium pump do? It pushes sodium out of the cell. Okay. So the purpose of sodium potassium pump is to maintain resting potential. And the purpose of sodium channel is to trigger action potential, that is spike in the voltage. Are you getting it? Yes? Your sodium gate is only going to open when depolarization starts. ठीक है? And sodium potassium pump is always running in the background क्योंकि उसको resting membrane potential maintain करना है. Got it? Divya? If this part is clear, should we move on to our very last section, which is we are going to be solving a few MCQs again to understand if whatever we have learned today has been registered well. All right, let's do it. Okay, let's go. Just a minute. All right, let's start. First, during an action potential, what ensures that another action potential doesn't immediately follow in the same section of axon? Correct, refractory period. Perfect. Yes. All right. Next, what does the sodium potassium pump do in a resting neuron? What does it do? We just discussed this. Yes, the answer is D. Correct. It is going to move potassium in and it is going to push sodium out. Correct? Very good. Third, what structure allows a signal to jump between gaps in the myelin sheath? Yes, Sanya, very good. Perfect, it's C. Next. Again, this is a little bit easy only. What causes depolarization during the action potential? Yes, correct. Sodium enters the neuron. Very good. And the last one, repeated only. What limits the frequency of action potentials according to you? Yes, very good. Absolute refractory period. Very good. All right. I think all of us were able to answer all the questions. Again, today I went really slowly to explain these concepts, but next lecture onwards, I'm going to pick up pace. This I purposely went slowly because there's a lot of jargon here, too many technical terms to remember, and I'm sure all of us are a little scared. At least when I was in college, every time I used to read resting potential, action potential, I used to be very scared. So I hope that you understood what it is. I tried to make it as simple as possible. If you have any questions, you can let me know so that I can address it in the next class. But yeah, given that we've understood this, next class we'll actually start understanding our brain and we'll try to understand CNS, PNS, and so on. All right? Okay, great. Any book to refer for this? Palak, I would suggest right now just listen to my lectures, okay? If you open any kind of biopsychology or neuropsychology textbook, at least for resting potential, action potential things, they make it complicated for no reason. Okay, what I explained to you with simple graph or simple numbers, they are going to explain the same thing over 4 or 5 pages. And as of now, especially if you're someone who is very new to neuropsychology or if you're scared of neuropsychology, that might reinforce your fear, is what I'm afraid. So right now, it is absolutely okay if you don't refer to any book for this section. As in when we proceed with other topics, once we get a little bit of confidence, then I'll tell you what textbook you can read. Okay? Fine. The pace was okay or was it too slow for you guys? Okay, great. All right. Shannon, are you here?
Yep.
Yes, okay.
Okay. Awesome. Sarah, you can stop the recording. Same place.
Wait,
No, not you, Sarah.
who can stop there? Okay.
Okay. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed the 2 lectures today. Tomorrow, we